Ich bin Miśra Bhagavan Das aus Dallas, Texas. I first became involved in Krishna consciousness as far back as I can remember. Was in my last life, I was in the German army, and I went to the temple, the Hare Krishna temple in Berlin, that was opened up by Prabhupada's godbrothers that visited Europe in the 1930s. Then I was killed by an American airplane that flew over and shot my German body to pieces. And then I was thinking of Americans at the time of death and took birth in the United States in 1958, the year that when Prabhupada took sannyas, or 1 year before that. In 1965, I was in Boston when Srila Prabhupada landed in Boston Harbor to start the Krishna consciousness movement in America. In 1966, I moved to Los Angeles, where I grew up going to church every Sunday, and Jesus Christ was my guru until I met a Hare Krishna devotee. I saw the first Hare Krishna devotees when I was 14 years old at a concert in Long Beach, California. We called them Zulus because we didn't know that they were from India. We didn't know what to think of them. You know, shaved heads, tilak, and saffron robes. But I was very much attracted. They seemed to glow. They lit up the place, and everything else seemed like dark except for these two brahmacharis. And then I went to a movie called The Concert for Bangladesh. And the beginning of the movie, George Harrison from the Beatles, well, actually, first there was a concert from Rabbi Shankar, which was amazed me because I'd never seen Indian music before. And I kept on hearing this sound called go whoop, which came from a tabla. And I was trying to figure out what instrument was making that sound. And I thought, whatever that is, someday I'm going to learn how to make that. I'm going to find out what that instrument is, and I'm going to play it and make that whoop sound, which I eventually did with the Mridanga. And then I met a Hare Krishna devotee later, but then George Harrison came on, and he leaned into the microphone, and he started the show by saying, Hare Krishna. When I heard Hare Krishna, it was the first time in my life I'd ever heard this Hare Krishna. And I couldn't get it out of my mind. It just immediately became like what we say, it was catchy. And it caught me, and I kept on thinking, Hare Krishna. I went home from the show, and I thought, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. So then I met a devotee and gave him a donation, began my devotional service. And then I turned 16 years old. We moved to Portland, Oregon, and I got some information about Hare Krishna from a record by George Harrison called Living in the Material World. And he kept on talking about somebody named Krishna. He said, we got to get out of this place by Lord Sri Krishna's grace. We have to get out of the material world. So then I decided I must meet these Hare Krishna people. And one day I found one downtown Portland, Oregon. And he gave me a little card, invited me to the temple. I went to church that morning on a Sunday, and in the church the youth was asked to try to speculate or come up with what kind of instrument that God plays, because we knew that God was a person, and they thought that maybe he must play some sort of musical instrument. So everybody was guessing. That people were saying like the big bass drum, big stuff, grand pianos, tubas, because they thought of God in awe and reverence. But me and two other kids said, the flute. So there was like 1, 2, 3 for the flute. So when I got to the Hare Krishna temple in Hawthorne Boulevard, Adaniya Swabhava Prabhu was the first devotee I met. And he was painting a life-size picture of Radha Krishna. And he said, "This is God." And I looked up and I saw Krishna playing the flute, and I said, "Oh, well, I always knew that God played a flute." So I was immediately convinced. And then came the Sunday feast, and Dinabandhu gave the lecture. Dinabandhu, who lives in Vrindavan, and he described how we're not the body, and how it's always me that's the same. And then came the prasadam, and back then prasadam was this, everything was cooked in ghee. They had 20-liter pots full of ghee, like 5 or 6 of them in the kitchen, completely filled to the top with ghee, and then they had woks full of ghee. So they had like enough ghee for an Ashwamedha sacrifice. And I took the prasadam, and then I was a devotee, because I realized I have to eat like this the rest of my life. And then Mahibharati Prabhu sold me some books. I bought Bhagavad Gita, Krishna book, and Kshirshopanishad, and The Perfection of Yoga. So I took my books home and I read the books, and then started going to the temple all the time, and decided to move into the temple. So Dinabandhu made an arrangement with my parents I could live in the temple if I kept on going to school, high school during the day. So I did that for a couple of months until I found out about the Radha Damodar traveling Sankirtan party with Vishnu Jan Swami and Tamal Krishna Goswami. So I was really attracted to that. And I felt like I needed to be with Tamal Krishna Goswami. So I got permission from our GBC, Jayatirtha, to go join the bus party. So I flew to Florida in January 1975 and began my life on the Radha Damodar party, which consisted of the morning program, traveling around on a bus, and doing book distribution all day long. So we did that until March 1976, and we came to Mayapur for the Gaur-Purnima festival of March 1976. So it was 80 men, we all took one airplane. The airplane was a big 747 for Air India, from New York to Bombay to Calcutta. And on the airplane was all devotees, the entire flight. And even the pilots and the stewardesses, they were like devotees too, because they were, like life member type people. So we had the kirtan on the airplane, we had arti, we had the ghee lamp going up and down the aisles with incense, and it was just like a flying temple. And we were chanting and dancing, and the plane was going up and down. It was a unique experience. I didn't realize that was the only time that was ever going to happen. I thought we were going to go to India every year like this. But it was a one-time special event. And then we came here to Mayapur, and my first day at the morning program, we had the announcements just like we have here in Mayapur. And then Jayapataka Swami came downstairs and made an announcement. And I'd never seen him before. And back then, Mayapur was run actually by Bhavananda, Achyutananda Maharaj, and Nitai Chand. So Jayapataka Swami at the time was not in charge of Mayapur. He was like maybe number 3 or 4. His job was a temple commander. That was his designation at the time. He was below the president, below the GBC, and he was an amazing person. I was asked by him, or he asked everybody, if you have any books from America. We're having trouble getting Prabhupada's books into India, and we haven't been able to print them in India. So if you have any books, leave them here with us, and because you can always get more when you go back to America. So I thought that's a good idea. So after breakfast prasadam, I made my way up the stairs in the Lotus building, and he was staying right where he lives right now. And I went inside his room, and I had a Bhagavad Gita, hardbound Macmillan Bhagavad Gita, and I said, "You said that you wanted some books. I have a book I can leave with you." So he said, "Oh yes, thank you very much," and he gave me a big smile, and he had me put the book on the shelf where he had a collection going. So that was the first time I saw Jayapataka Swami. And I went on to had some exciting times here with that festival. I got on a couple of morning walks with Srila Prabhupada. One of them was along the wall here. There was a display of different temples and projects going on in ISKCON, and Prabhupada kind of went past those, and then he stopped for the quotes about his books from the scholars, and Prabhupada was really impressed with that. And he stopped the whole walk. And what was interesting about a morning walk with Prabhupada was that it was everything was a very controlled mode of goodness atmosphere. And when Prabhupada would go, everybody would go. And Prabhupada stop, everybody like that. There was no, like it gets a little pushy and shovey here in India sometimes, like on the local train or at the Shinga prayers on the weekend. There's a tendency, to scrunch up. But when Prabhupada, everybody kept social distance, with Prabhupada there. And he just created a beautiful atmosphere. So I started seeing Jayapataka Swami because he was on the morning walks. There was another one where Prabhupada sent after Tamal Krishna Goswami to China. That was a historical event. And after Goswami got the order to go to China, we went up on the roof of the Lotus building, and I slid in on that morning walk. And when we got on the Lotus building, Prabhupada turned around and he faced the crowd, the GBCs and the sannyasis. And Prabhupada opened up his arms. He had his cane and his bead bag, and he had a big smile, and he said, "You'll all be happy to know Tamal is going to China." So there was like a little clap, but not too much because it was kind of like he was being exiled. It's like a suicide mission. But it was the reason we have Chinese devotees. So he took up that order, and we all went back to America. And I didn't see Jayapataka Swami again until a movie came out in 1980. In 1980, there was a movie called World of Hare Krishna. And it was one of these going from one place to another in ISKCON and showing that how we do, food for life over here in West Bengal, and here's the Arctic in Mexico, and here's one place to another. So then they said, here's Jayapataka Swami giving a lecture in the local language in Bengali. So Jayapataka Maharaj was speaking in Bengali, and I couldn't understand what he was saying until he said, "United Nations of the spiritual world." I understood that. And he was, I still didn't really catch on to his greatness at the time, but I was starting to figure out who this person was, when I saw him speaking in Bengali and giving the United Nations speech. So then, the next time I saw Jayapataka Swami, let me see what happened. Oh, I ended up getting married to my wife, and we came to, I joined the American military, the Air Force, because it was I needed a job, and it was an opportunity. So I was stationed in the Air Force in the Philippines, and then I came with her to Mayapur for the 1986 Gaur Purnima festival. And at Gaur Purnima, I saw Jayapataka Swami at this point, he was becoming more of a kind of going up the ladder as people were disappearing in front of him. He was going to the front of the class, and he became like the leader of Mayapur during the 80s. And then he was serving. He was in this big position, and I saw him just humbly serving prasadam to guests in the Sulav kitchen. So that was like my next impression of Jayapataka Maharaj. He was the topmost person in this in management position, and he's taking the position of a servant for serving the devotees prasadam. So that was really touching. And I didn't see Jayapataka Swami again until I came back. Must have been 2005. There was a friend of mine that never been to India, Yadavacharya, and I said, well, you've never been to India. I haven't been to India for a while. We should go, let's do it. I can show you around a little bit. So we came here to Mayapur, and on that trip, I ended up with Jayapataka Swami and Hari Sari and myself. Somehow we're in the Ganga together and broke away from all the other devotees, and it was just the three of us. And we did Gayatri, and then there was just some conversation. And Hari Sari was talking about how he had this tooth from Srila Prabhupada, and Tamal Krishna, he was going to try and keep it, and then Tamal Krishna Maharaj talked him into said that, no, you can't keep Prabhupada's tooth. That's like it's like one of his bones, that's not like prasadam. You shouldn't be, you shouldn't have that, you should give it to me and I'll dispose of it properly. So Hari Sari got tricked out of Prabhupada's tooth. He ended up getting another one, but he gave that tooth to Tamal Krishna Goswami. So Tamal Krishna Goswami immediately turned it into prasadam and put it on a chain, like a little, and which he wore for the rest of his life with Prabhupada's tooth. So then Hari Sari was telling us, so then Jayapataka Swami said, yes, I remember that he had the tooth on because Jayapataka Swami put Tamal Krishna Goswami into samadhi. And he said, I remember he had that tooth on, and then Jayapataka Swami said that, therefore, this samadhi of Tamal Krishna Goswami is a Dui samadhi. That means that it's both a samadhi of Tamal Krishna Goswami and it's a samadhi of Srila Prabhupada also, because their remains are both inside that samadhi. So then later on I heard that Jayapataka Swami was an associate of Lord Chaitanya in his previous life. So I thought that maybe he meant that he was like just part of Lord Chaitanya's pastimes in some sort of, like he was just there. I didn't realize that how close he was to Lord Chaitanya until I got to know him more. I was here somewhere about 2007 or something. There was a big storm, and Jayapataka Swami was walking around the grounds here, and he wasn't disturbed. Everything, they had all these big arrangements for Gaur Purnima, and a lot of it just got blown down. And I saw how Jayapataka Swami, he was so cool and calm, He looked at, like, they had this one big, huge bamboo thing with grass and banners on it that crossed over the road here, and it was just trashed, the storm had just knocked the whole thing down, and it was just in a big pile. And Jayapataka Swami said, well, we'll have to fix that. And he didn't get disturbed, and it was like a reason to be disturbed because, it was like some really serious damage done. But he was so calm, and seemed like he was just tolerant and calm, patient. and very, very steady. So I started kind of hanging around behind him because I was getting attached to, attracted to his personality and starting to see what great person he was. One time I was picking up trash off the ground, and he came along with his entourage on a walk. He would, before he got sick, he used to walk around this property all the time, and there'd always be like 20 people with him, maybe some kids. And he saw me. I was picking up straws at a Dobb booth, and he said, "Hey, children, can you help me, Sri Bhagavan, pick up the straws?" So he had all the kids come and help me pick up the garbage off the ground, and then I got to see him, give lectures, and time went by. Then it came to his 70th appearance day, the Vyasa Puja, it must have been 2019, maybe, or how old is he now?
73.
Okay, so let's go back 3 years, 2019. And there was another storm. They always have these crazy Trinavarta type storms around here, like just out of nowhere, Suddenly it's a perfect, nice, calm day, and then all of a sudden the wind starts blowing, and we have like Lord Indra's devastating rainfall. So everybody was running here and there. Jayapataka Swami had just gotten done speaking, and he sold a whole bunch of sets of books, and I bought a set of Chaitanya Charitamritas, and I saw how he was like the ultimate book distributor. It's amazing, he would, any program that he does, he turns the whole thing into a big Sankirtan fiesta and sells piles of sets of books, just like he's doing to this day. And I ran inside of a tent when the storm started, and I ended up all by myself with this big a tent with it, and his whole life of Jayapataka Swami was inside the tent. All the pictures, it had the 50 different instructions that he'd received from Srila Prabhupada. They were all written out, and then it had pictures of him as like a little baby. And then there was one picture where he's in the Canadian military. And I thought, this is a Jayapataka, because Jayapataka means the victory flag. And I thought, this is the real Sankirtan general, because he had on a Canadian uniform. He looked really sharp, had a braid and some medals, and it was a nice uniform, and it was like General Jayapataka, the victory of Sankirtan. And so that I got to know him a lot, and then I realized at that festival, that 70th Vyasa Puja, that he's an intimate associate of Lord Chaitanya. He's not like one of us. He's somebody who's come from Lord Chaitanya's abode. He's sent by Lord Chaitanya to assist Srila Prabhupada. I just came to that realization that he's not a Kripa Siddha, he's a Nitya Siddha. And well, then he initiated my son Abhay Charan Nimai Das, and then also I have another son, Navadeep Chandra Das, who married his disciple. And so now and Abhay Charan Nimai Das also married one of his disciples. So I have a son and two daughter-in-laws that are his disciple. So he's become like a family guru for me. And he's always very kind to me. He calls me his god brother. He's embraced me. He's told me that stay in Mayapur if I could. He said we can use you in Bangladesh. I still have yet to do that. Oh, and one day he came out of his little hospital buggy, and he said to me, he was in the wheelchair, and he said, he looked up at me and he said, I was just walking along. I was coming from Govinda's restaurant, and I paid my obeisances when he came out of the hospital boat. And then he looks up from his wheelchair and said, you should go to Chile. And I was like, Chile? And I was going to try to ask him, like, what am I going to do there? Or why is this? And before I could, he just, the guy who was running he just scooted away and went into the Lotus building. So that was in 2019. So I took that as an instruction, and I met some devotees of his, disciples of his, and I went to Chile, and I did book distribution there, and I got caught down there during Corona. So I ended up stranded in Chile, away from my home in Dallas, Texas. And I was always hoping to get back here to Mayapur so I could have more of Jayapataka Swami's association. And then, it took 2.5 years, almost 3 years, for Corona to slow down. But then finally I came here and been going to Jayapataka Swami's darshans up on the rooftop about Lord Chaitanya. And what I think the last thing I want to say is that he stayed completely transcendental during the Corona. Why all the devotees were getting involved with talking about Corona and the vaccine, and there was arguments whether we should take the vaccine. There's like all this Corona kata, and he never let it bring him down. He always stayed with Lord Chaitanya's pastimes from Chaitanya Bhagavata and Chaitanya Charitamrita, because that's really where he's from. He's an associate of Lord Chaitanya and part of the Gaur Leela. I'd like to give a few more memories while it's on my mind, because in the future, devotees will want to know as much about Prabhupada as they can find out from devotees like myself who had the good fortune to have some of his personal association. So Srila Prabhupada came to 1975, Srila Prabhupada went to Caracas, Venezuela, and then Miami, Florida, and then he landed in Atlanta, Georgia. So the Radha Damodar party was run by Tamal Krishna Maharaj and Vishnu John Swami, and it was a book distribution party. Tamal Krishna Maharaj actually invented the concept of putting deities and books and brahmacharis in a bus and taking the temple to the people. To talk about Prabhupada's pastimes, you really have to include Tamal Krishna Goswami. Just like if you talk about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, there's a tendency to mention Srila Prabhupada, who fulfilled his mission. Similarly, Tamal Krishna Goswami had a very special relationship with Srila Prabhupada, like Sarup Damodar had with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He was his right-hand man, and when Srila Prabhupada was planning out how to spread ISKCON, it was Tamal Krishna Goswami would have ideas and execute it. For instance, Tamal Krishna Goswami purchased the land that we're sitting in right now, here in Sri Mayapur Dham. Tamal Krishna Goswami went with Prabhupada to Japan to print the first Krishna book and the Srimad Bhagavatams. Tamal Krishna Maharaj was the first GBC of India. He was Prabhupada's the Sankirtan leader for ISKCON from 1968. Tamal Krishna Maharaj's philosophy in Krishna consciousness was all about serving the spiritual master. He thought that the purpose of the secret of success in spiritual life is to please the spiritual master. He didn't ever talk about how he wanted to go back to Godhead or become a pure lover of Krishna. He just always talked about serving Srila Prabhupada. And so when Prabhupada came to Atlanta, Georgia, I got to see Prabhupada for the first time. He came in the front door of the temple, and he was brilliant as the sun, as they say, Prabhupada just lit up the whole place. I mean, I guess it could also have been because, the sun was coming up at a certain time of the day and shine, but whatever it was a phenomenon, because Prabhupada he had saffron, and he lit up the whole place. It was just like one of these big old lights here just rolling into the room, golden light. And then I watched how Prabhupada scooted along. You could see how he wasn't touching the ground exactly. He was kind of like gliding, like a hovercraft, just. And he was fast. He was faster than all the people. He had these young men that were trying to keep up with him, and they're all like puffing and panting, and they couldn't. They didn't have the energy that Prabhupada had, and Prabhupada was, close to 80 years old at this time. This is 1975, so Prabhupada was 79 years old and moving like a teenager. Just wow, like a sports star, a cricket player or something. He was just amazing how much energy he had. So I followed Prabhupada into the temple room, and the Gaurnitai deities opened up, and Srila Prabhupada paid his obeisances, and I paid my obeisances, and I had a lucky break that right in front of me was Srila Prabhupada's 2 lotus feet as he was paying his obeisances. He had on these maroon socks. It was February 1975. And I just spontaneously, I just grabbed those 2 lotus feet and held on to them for a moment. And then Prabhupada was starting to get up, so I let go. And he looked down upon me like, who is this? I was 16 years old at the time, so Prabhupada, he said, it's just some child, So he went on, he sat down and he gave this lecture, a famous lecture where Prabhupada, when he mentioned the mercy of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, how he spread this movement, Krishna consciousness movement all over the world and saved all these Westerners from the material existence. And then Prabhupada started, he went into a trance and just sort of left the world for a moment. Everybody wasn't quite sure what to do, and then Prabhupada came back out of it and said, just have kirtan, And the devotees that were sitting close to Prabhupada, they got wet from his tears. So that was a moment. And then Prabhupada, it was an exciting weekend with Srila Prabhupada in Atlanta. And it's interesting that Atlanta became a big part of Jayapataka Swami's pastimes, because it's New Panahati Dham. And I don't know how, but somehow Jayapataka Swami ended up getting involved with this temple more than any other temple in America. And so that was where we saw Prabhupada the first time. And Prabhupada, it was Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's appearance day the next day. So Srila Prabhupada did arti for Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. So we got to see Prabhupada do arti, because he didn't do that every day. Prabhupada gave a Sunday feast lecture, and he opened up the floor for questions. Now, I knew that Prabhupada didn't do questions on every lecture. I was already noticing that. So I thought, I better ask a question. Prabhupada's got a question. So I threw my hand up. So Prabhupada looked over at me and he said, yes. And I realized that I need a question, and I need a question right now. So the first thing that came out of my head was, Srila Prabhupada, how can I perfect my devotional service? And Prabhupada said, just chant Hare Krishna, and everything else will come. It's very simple. So that was my first instruction from Srila Prabhupada. The next day, Tamal Krishna Goswami entered us. We were like 40 Radha Damodar men. At this point, the Radha Damodar party had grown from Vishnu John Swami in one bus to Tamal Krishna Maharaj and Vishnu John Swami and 3 buses and a bunch of vans. And it was going to grow into eventually it would be 140 devotees on the Radha Damodar party by that July. At this point, there was a few of us that we could fit into Prabhupada's room, even though it was really squishy. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj introduced every single one of us to Prabhupada personally. So when it came my turn, I put the flower on Prabhupada's desk, and Goswami said, "This is Bhakta Michael. He joined our party at a young age." So Prabhupada looked at me and said, "Ah, very nice." And then I sat down, and then Prabhupada told us that, "I'm always thinking of you boys in the vans." And I was touched by that because Prabhupada said he was always thinking about us. We were doing book distribution and sending the money, building Mayapur. We built the Lotus building. Eventually we built the Chakra building. All the money that was coming from Radha Damodar was going straight here to Mayapur. So that was another connection between Atlanta, Jayapataka Swami, and Tamal Krishna Goswami, and Prabhupada. So Prabhupada said that if you stay brahmachari, you'll save yourself a lot of trouble. He didn't really order us that we had to stay brahmachari. He just said it like that: you'll save yourself a lot of trouble. My spiritual master, he was brahmachari and went straight from brahmachari to sannyas. I think we didn't realize exactly the depth of what he was saying because most of us got married. I think if we had any idea of what kind of trouble he was talking about, we might have had second thoughts. But he didn't really press us hard on that, but he went on to saying how you have a good leader with Tamal Krishna Goswami. He said, you just by pleasing him, then I'll be pleased. Just follow his instructions. He's my representative. And I realized that Tamal Krishna Goswami and Prabhupada had a special relationship, like nobody really had that kind of relationship with Prabhupada. Prabhupada didn't give out such endorsements like that. I could see how they'd been working together a long time. And then we went out away from Atlanta. Prabhupada went on, he did his tour. 1975 was a big year for Prabhupada. So many temples opened. The Krishna Balaram Mandir opened up. And they had a big Gaur Purnima festival. And they got the New York temple, the big skyscraper, the Denver. Prabhupada went and opened the Denver temple. I mean, Prabhupada was on the move. He went to Australia and opened the Melbourne temple and left. And he kept on coming back and forth to Mayapur, Vrindavan. It was all over the world. I mean, Prabhupada went around the world twice in 1975. And he met Indira Gandhi. So it was real happening times. It was really exciting. We didn't have any time for getting into Maya. It was a marathon. Every day was a marathon that year. And then we saw Prabhupada. Then in July 1975, we had all the buses came together. And then Tripurari Swami, he joined the Radha Damodar party with his bus. He had a blue school bus. So then we had a picture taken of the 4 Radha Damodar buses, and Radha Damodar in the middle, the sannyasis that ran the buses, and Srila Prabhupada right there in the middle of the whole picture. And I was fortunate to be in that picture. I was right behind Vishnu Jan Swami's danda. And that's a famous picture. That was an amazing moment, because at that point the Radha Damodar party had really become like an army of Sankirtan devotees. And Prabhupada was so pleased with us that he would go on to installing deities for the buses, because the buses all had Panchatattva pictures except for the Radha Damodar bus. So Prabhupada, he installed 4 sets of Gaurnitai deities in the Chicago temple, so that every bus either had the Radha Damodar deities or a set of Gaurnitai deities, brass Gaurnitai deities. One of those sets of Gaurnitai deities ended up in Dallas, where I live right now, Radhakala Chanji Dham. So I'm still serving those deities by living there. And Prabhupada was at at a press conference, and there was he took the opportunity to try to give protection to women. Prabhupada was very sad to see that this equal gender thing. Prabhupada actually said that this is the men's idea, demoniac men, to try to break up the family, tell women. He said actually women have less brain substance than men. They should always be protected. They should be protected by their father, and then by their husband, and then by their oldest son. And he said that women they're not happy. Independence for a woman is a miserable life. He said that no woman can be happy unless they have a good man taking care of them. And the reporter was very upset about this. There was this lady. She goes, "Why do you shave your head?" And Prabhupada said, "Well, why do you shave your legs? Why do you dress like that?" And Prabhupada said, "Well, we dress like this so people will know that, just like there's a policeman who's has a uniform, or a fireman." He said, "We dress like this so people will know that we are the Hare Krishna people." And the newspaper articles came out, and the article was all just about this statement that Prabhupada said that women have less brain substance than men, and that he quoted a professor that said they have 64 ounces, men have 64 ounces, women have 32 ounces. What Prabhupada was trying to do is just establish that women should be protected. And it's a Kali Yuga thing that women are independent. It's actually very hard on women, this independence thing. They're not happy with their careers and being torn away from their children and having to fend on their own and not have anybody taking care of them. It's actually all the natural things women want is to have a husband, have a home, and be able to be with their children and raise their children. So that's what Prabhupada was trying to say. And then it went on. A year later, actually, I saw Prabhupada in New York, and he brought up the incident. He said that in Chicago it caused a great agitation. I was sitting right close to Prabhupada when he said this. He said that I said that women have less brain substance than men, but actually, this is a fact. And he said that it's only a material thing. On the spiritual level, there's no restriction for women to become pure devotees of Krishna. He said that they should be under the protection of a man, not independent, and that they will be happier that way. And so the next time we saw Prabhupada after Chicago was the Gaur Purnima Festival, 1976. I mentioned how I went on a couple of morning walks. Prabhupada sent Tamal Krishna Maharaj to China. Prabhupada said, "You'll all be happy to know that Tamal is going to China." Prabhupada went on the walks. He liked the quotes from his books. So that was really ecstatic to be around. Prabhupada was around all the time. One time I ended up becoming a Mridanga player because Prabhupada stopped and saw a kirtan that was going on. Vishnu Dutt was playing right over here by the Lotus building. And I was standing there, and Prabhupada said, "Look how my Western disciples have learned how to play Mridanga like experts." And I said, when I heard Prabhupada say that, I thought, I've got to learn how to play Mridanga. Prabhupada likes it when us Westerners learn how to play Mridanga. And Prabhupada gave class every single day. Prabhupada went around, you know how we do the thing in the morning? It was there in the Lotus building. And Prabhupada would go in the big circle in front of the deities and behind the Vyasa-san and stop and ring the bell, So that was when that was the kirtan would just explode, and Prabhupada would go ding, 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 ding with the bell. And one time, one of his godbrothers came, Madhava Maharaj, with a couple of other disciples of his, and he came up to the gate, that little gate, where the museum is? And there's that gate that kind of empties out just below the stairs of the Lotus building. So Prabhupada's godbrother was standing there, and he was kind of deciding whether he's going to come in or not. And then Prabhupada came around, and I was thinking, well, this is going to be good. Let's see what happens here. And then Prabhupada saw him for just a moment, but then Prabhupada just looked straight ahead, like, where were you when I needed you? And went ahead and just got to the bell, and he had 500 Western disciples, this roaring kirtan. And thinking back on it, I wish I had gone out there and greeted Prabhupada's godbrother and asked him to come in, but nobody did. We were a little rude to him, and he got a little. He didn't take it that well, so he kind of got. I saw in his face he wasn't happy, and then he turned around and walked off back to wherever he'd come from, and I could tell he'd walked for some ways, to get there. But nobody invited him in, and Prabhupada just kept moving. So then Prabhupada would stop and give class, have Guru Puja and give class. So just like we do now, that's that whole program in the morning with taking Prabhupada on the palanquin. That was just from what he used to do. So then that's when I met Jayapataka Swami, and he asked if we had any books, and I gave him some books. And then we got back to, we went to Vrindavan, and Prabhupada, the same thing, Prabhupada giving lecture every single day. I remember one thing Prabhupada said in the lecture that really kind of stuck out. He said that it was on my 18th birthday in April 1976, and I was sitting there, we were all there. I didn't really understand everything Prabhupada said back then, because his accent was so strong, and we were all kind of a little sleepy a little bit. And Prabhupada was talking, and he said quietly, he goes, "We ask all of our students, no intoxication, no gambling, no meat eating, no illicit sex. No sex! And if you can't do that, then there's some, what did they say? Compromise. I can't remember the word. But it meant like, there's, basically he was saying that, well, yeah, you can get married and have sex for children, but really, being Krishna consciousness meant no sex, actually. So Prabhupada was so present back then, another thing that happened, I remember there was a Shania band here at the gate. And it was right during japa period. It was like 6:30 in the morning. It was one of those South Indian Shanias, with the big long Shania. And the guy playing a madanga, he had like the taps on his fingers, and he had a little stick. It was a big madanga, and he was like lightning, just like brrr. And then there was a kartal player, and they were inside the little tower on top of the main gate, just like with the same main gate right now, So it was suddenly right there in the middle of japa. All of a sudden, this Shania starts blasting the music. They were so loud, and it was this South Indian Shania music, really fast and loud, and Prabhupada was coming back on the morning walk, and the devotees came to said, Prabhupada, they didn't realize that Prabhupada actually had made the arrangement for these Shania players to be there. Prabhupada, there's this music going on. These people went up in the tower and they're playing this clarinet thing, and we can't chant our japa, And I heard Prabhupada, he put his cane into the ground, and he stopped the whole thing and the walk, and he said, "It is the music to the gates of Vaikuntha." So that was it against Chennai. You know, we had Chennai ever since. They turned it on about a year later. Then they started playing a tape, which they still play. I think I heard it just a couple days ago from the top of the Samadhi. Or on one morning walk, that Prabhupada was talking about different things. He always kept on talking about the TOVP. We didn't call it TOVP back then. He called it the Vedic Planetarium, and he was always he was talking about it. I remember he was talking about this huge temple, you know, and it'll have all the planetary system in it. And I was looking out over the fields of rice, and I mean, back then there was nothing here, you know. There was the Lotus Building, and the Sarab kitchen and the wall, which had weavers in it that used to weave cloth, and then there was the long building was still under construction, and then there was the Gaudiya Math temples, like 2 or 3, and then there was the yoga pit, and that's all there was. There wasn't any of these shops. There wasn't any restaurants. There wasn't, you name it, it wasn't. So I was wondering, you know, what's Prabhupada talking about? You know, a big temple in this place? I thought we were just like on the, you know, out in the jungle somewhere in the edge of the earth. But Prabhupada had the vision. And one point he said that we should stop everything we're doing and bring all the devotees here to Mayapur and just develop Mayapur. And I remember Rameshwar, he was like stunned, you know, because he's the head of the BBT. He was running, you know, 200 devotees and the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust in Los Angeles. And here's Prabhupada saying, let's just stop everything and bring everybody here. And he goes, well, but Prabhupada, we have so many preaching projects going on all over the world. And Prabhupada said, we'll preach to people here. We'll bring the whole world to Mayapur. He said that he pointed his cane in the direction of the Goshal and said that we'll put up an airport, and then people will come from all over the world, and then we'll preach to them. So that didn't happen, and I always thought for all these years, you know, from 76 all the way till 2006, I kept on wondering, you know, why didn't we do that, or what happened to that instruction? I couldn't find it on the Veda base or anywhere, in any Prabhupada's conversations or anywhere. So I ran into Rameshwar by Krishna's mercy. We just he was here one year. You know, he came here for Gaur Purnima, and I happened to be here that year. So as soon as I saw Rameshwar, you know, I said, Rameshwar Prabhu, Hare Krishna, my name is Sri Bhagavan Das. I remember in 1976, on that morning walk, when Prabhupada said that we should stop everything and bring all the devotees here. And he said, well, yeah, Prabhupada said something like that. And I said, Prabhupada said exactly that. He said, we'll bring all the devotees here. And then you said, well, Prabhupada, we have all these preaching projects going all over the world. And Prabhupada said, we'll preach to the people here. And he said, well, okay, he said that, but I don't think he really meant it literally, because you know, how could that really happen, you know? And I said, okay, well, as long as at least you're acknowledging that he said it. I was happy with that, because, you know, I was worried that he was going to say, I don't know what you're talking about. I never heard that. But so I was happy that he acknowledged that Prabhupada said that. And he said, well, what I think Prabhupada was trying to do was just emphasize the importance of Mayapur. And I settled for that, because it was pretty, I mean, to actually do that would have meant actually closing all the temples all over the world and bringing every single devotee here to Mayapur, which is exactly what Prabhupada said to do. I don't know how history would have changed if everybody actually did that. But that was Prabhupada. That's what Prabhupada said, and he was stressing how important Mayapur is by making that statement. And that was. Let me think of anything else. Prabhupada would talk about Krishna being the creator. He said he was talking about the flowers. He they have flowers on top of the Lotus building. So Prabhupada stopped and looked at the flowers, and he said, "How can anybody possibly say that all this happens by chance?" He said, "Look at the design of each flower. They had like little yellow ones and purple ones." He said there has to be an intelligence behind this. So that's what I can think of right off the top of my head, because when you have memories, they get buried, and that's why I'm happy to take a moment to tell some of these stories, because otherwise, all of us Prabhupada disciples, we're an endangered species. It won't be long before all of us have gone on to our next destination. And Prabhupada's personal association was a special opportunity. Everything Prabhupada did was ecstatic. It was all pastimes, Like when we were in New York. Oh, the last time I saw Prabhupada, after the Gaur Purnima festival, and when I met Jayapataka Swami, and then we went to New York, and Prabhupada came for the Rath Yatra in New York, and we had the big building, and this was the last time I got to see Srila Prabhupada physically. He was really happy that we had this building. Oh, and there was a devotee who came back after being gone for a while. His name was Bali Madan. And I saw how Prabhupada dealt with somebody who would have trouble, have what we call a fall down. You'd think that Prabhupada would be like, persecuting him or, angry, but like, how we have a tendency to, somebody falls down, then everybody's like, kick them up, kick them when they're up, kick them when they're down, kick them all around. Prabhupada didn't have that kind of mood. He immediately took Bali Madan and reinstated him and made him the GBC of Australia, and told him to give class the next morning. So Bali Madan immediately Prabhupada had him giving classes and brought him back. And that was Prabhupada's mood. Like Madhavisha had left New York. That's another story. Madhavisha left New York, and he took a teenage girl with him, and a bunch of money, and disappeared for a year. And then he was very repentant about a year later, and he came to see Prabhupada in Vrindavan. And Prabhupada, so here's somebody that's, fell down, took money, ran away, disappears. He comes back, he shaved up, he wants to come back to Prabhupada. And so what do you think Prabhupada had to say to somebody like that? He said, "Where is your wife?" And Prabhupada said, "Don't leave us. Whatever happens, don't leave us. You can serve as Grihastha, but stay within the Krishna Conscious Society." And so Prabhupada was really dynamic in New York. It was such a great victory for Prabhupada to have this big, huge temple. After all, Prabhupada, in 1966, Prabhupada was walking alone on the streets of New York, and now he's riding on the cart of Subhadra, because we had the Rath Yatra festival. I got to have a darshan with Prabhupada up in his room, and in the evening, Prabhupada was with Urmila and her son and her father. So Prabhupada was talking about how the real love is like the child for the mother. Mother for the child. And he said that the mother doesn't expect anything back from the child. She just gives love. And Urmila was there with her baby, and she was really beaming, because Prabhupada was using her as an example, and she was getting all the attention. And then her father said that, well, I can't really relate to loving God. I can relate to loving humanity. And then Prabhupada said that, well, if you love God, then you can love everybody else. He said, by loving Krishna, it's like putting the rocks in the middle of a pond, and then all the rivulets go out and evenly. So he said, if you have separate interests, then there's always a conflict. So Prabhupada was doing darshans, morning walks in Central Park, and Jayananda was there. I was with Jayananda helping out with the Rath Yatra carts. And Prabhupada took a tour of the New York temple. He came into the kitchen one day. I was cooking milk sweets. That was my service. And I used to make these para and burfi and sweet rice and sandesh for the morning offering, for Mangalarti. So Prabhupada had sent his servant down, Harisari, to tell me that he liked the para. One time Harisari gave me a whole plate of Prabhupada's remnants, and he just handed me this big plate, and he said, bring this back clean. So I was like, wow, I had Prabhupada's remnants, and I distributed them to different devotees and then I went and washed the plate and brought it back to Harisari. So Prabhupada's presence was so ecstatic. All we could think about, when he was there, was him and serving him. And then he took a tour of the kitchen in New York, and there was these big walk-in coolers, like big gigantic refrigerators. Well, one of them was clean and nice, so they showed that one to Prabhupada. See, Prabhupada, we have this huge refrigerator. And the other one hadn't been cleaned up, we didn't have time, and it had like spilled prasadam and stuff. It was a mess. It was really bad. There was flowers and buckets of old prasadam and all this stuff messed up. So Tamal Krishna Goswami was just about to open the door to show the other refrigerators to the Prabhupada, and Vishnu Gadar was behind Prabhupada, and he was doing this stuff like, no. And then Goswami he saw Vishnu Gadar, and Prabhupada's right in between. And then he said, well, Prabhupada, this refrigerator looks just like the other one. We'll move you right along now. So Prabhupada went with him, and then then there was a play, Prabhupada, of the Age of Kali play. There was a movie. We had a theater in New York, so Prabhupada was there, and I got to sit behind him, and we had different events. And then finally there was the Rath Yatra. So the Rath Yatra was Prabhupada got on Subhadra's cart, and now Prabhupada was like the king of New York, And Donald Trump, who would later become the president, he helped finance the Rath Yatra. He donated the land to build the carts on. So he was watching the Rath Yatra from his penthouse or up in his office. And everybody was focused on the Prabhupada and the Rath Yatra in New York, the whole city. And then Prabhupada stopped at Washington Square Park, which happened to be where he had the very first Harinam. The first time Prabhupada went out on Harinam was at Washington Square Park. The Thompson Square Park is very famous because they filmed that one. The first Harinam was not filmed, or nobody took any pictures. There was no newspaper article. So Thompson Square Park has the credit. But actually it was Washington Square Park where the first Harinam was. And Prabhupada gave his last lecture in America in Washington Square Park. He gave the story of Lord Jagannath. And then he departed for other parts of the world. 1976 turned into 1977, and then Prabhupada spent the rest of the year in India until finally he left us in November 1977. So thank you very much for letting me speak about Prabhupada and remember some of these stories. Devotees have told me, you should write a book or something, and I probably never get around to that. So today is the opportunity to share some of that Prabhupada Leela with you. And remember Prabhupada, and remember Jayapataka Swami, who's Prabhupada's dear servant. All glory to Srila Prabhupada, all glory to Srila Jayapataka Swami. Hare Krishna.